Hi all, so today we're doing the Carbine tier list. Someone on Reddit asked me to do so here we are. This is largely going to be based on personal opinion. Of course, I will try and factor in objective opinion into a lot of these, but there will be personal bias, obviously. Let it be known that I'm an NSO main, and I played VS for the better part of 4 years, and while I have experience with the TR and NC Carbines, it is not nearly as much as I do with the Vonu and NSO ones. Nonetheless, I still have opinions. They may be trash, but I still have opinions. So, starting with the NS11C. I really like this gun. I really like it. I think it's really well balanced. I really like .75 ADS. I like the recoil pattern. I like everything about it. That said, I think objectively it's a B tier carbine at best. Honestly, it's probably closer to a C. It just has a lack of damage output on the whole, and it doesn't really excel at anything. That's really its main problem. ACX-11, one of the only 200 damage carbines on this list. I think the only 200 damage carbine on this list, because I forget what Charger is. ACX is probably a B tier. It's unique. I think it's worth playing if you play NC, just because it's the only 200 damage carbine. Other than that, I think it gets a little outshined by other NC carbines, but literally every NC carbine in this list will be B tier or higher, so honestly you can pick whatever one you want. Bandit is an easy S tier, insanely high damage output, 632 at 167. Really easy recoil, good range performance, even though it's meant to be in close range, 0.75. Like, Bandit is just amazing. Bandit is an amazing carbine. It is absolutely mandatory on the directive, in my opinion. It's just outstanding. There's no reason not to use the Bandit, unless you want to use any one of NC's other amazing carbines. It's that good. CB100 is probably C tier. It's a weird damage model. It's 714 at 143. It's fine. It's a starter carbine. It's not amazing. I think it suffers badly from recoil issues and from just not feeling specialized, but it's a solid enough carbine. It works. That's the thing here. So I want to preface that C tier is like okay, B tier is good, A tier is great, S tier is amazing. Like, S tier is pretty much broken. D tier is bad, and F tier is just don't use it. So C is like our okay tier. This is a true scale where the middle is actually okay instead of C tier being bad. C tier is, it's okay. It's a usable carbine. It's fine for directive purposes, basically. CB200 I'm going to put in B tier. It's actually not that much better than the CB100, but it is a 167 carbine, which has its 3-tap advantages. It has a long 3-shot range, which is really, really handy. I think it's 15 meters. So it's a solid carbine. It works well at range because it's a 167 model. I think it also has recoil issues. Pretty much all the NSO carbines do, to be honest. But I think it's a solid option nonetheless. CBX75 is straight S tier. 800 at 143, which is a good damage model. Fast reload, great recoil. It's just a really good carbine. I don't think it's as good as Bandit. I will largely not be doing like inter-tier rankings, by the way, but I think it's S tier. At the very least, it's A tier, but personally, I'd slide it into S. At least compared to the other NSO carbines, because there will be, like I said, some bias in this list. I think it's an S tier carbine. Charger is weird, where it's really good on the first, 7 rounds in the mag, where it has theoretically really silly damage output, and then it just has decent damage output. I still think it's a B tier carbine. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's a little bit too gimmicky to work around. But it's fine. It's a good carbine. It is still a good weapon. It's just a little weird compared to something more reliable. Cougar TR's ranged option is probably a B. Standard 167 carbine. It's like a lot of the standard 167s are going to be B tier. I'll just be honest outright, because they're all good. 167 is inherently a good damage model to have in this game, so pretty much all the 167 carbines are going to end up in B tier or higher. Eclipse. Eclipse is weird. Eclipse is a really weird gun to rank, because largely it is just a Solstice with a heat mechanic and an impulse on the barrel available to it. Eclipse is weird. Eclipse is hard to rank. There is a Gunnar playstyle where you play unstable ammo and you just jump jet around and farm people because unstable ammo is completely broken. I think Eclipse is B tier. I think it's worth the grind. I do think it is worth the grind as a carbine. But in my opinion, the damage output and really just lack of it doesn't excel anywhere, which is why I can't really put it higher. Yeah, the Impulse Underbarrel is really handy, but you do have Impulse Nades, so do you really need to grind a full Carbine or Axiom? Eh. And the unstable hipfire build is shitter. It is a shitter build, which makes it solid, but I think it's still a B tier. It just has too little damage. Fortuna is definitely worth getting. It will be sitting in A tier. The only reason it's not an S is because a couple other NC Carbines are just a bit better. But Mercenary is already a very good carbine, and just applying shiny bonuses and an Impulse Underbarrel to it make Fortuna a good gun. It is objectively a good carbine. I think it's absolutely worth the grind. Um, yeah, it's a good gun. It's a better Fortuna. It's a better Mercenary. The Mercenary is already like the best starter carbine, so you know you can't really go wrong with it. Gauss Compact is the S variant of the Mercenary. So basically, you lose a little bit of damage to gain better recoil control and a couple more attachments. Ultimately, all the S series carbines are just not that good because they don't really offer anything. If you can control the recoil on one of the normal versions, you're fine. Having access to like the underbarrel shoddy is funny, but since the NS11 got access to the underbarrel shoddy in the Arsenal patch, they just don't really have a point. I would really like to see the S series carbines get impulse launchers, so they can kind of be like shitty versions of directive guns. But until that happens, Ghost Compact is going to have to sit in D tier. GD7 is S tier. It has insane damage output, 845 at 143. It is fairly easy to control recoil, especially for the damage output it has. It has a quick reload. It's a really good carbine. It might honestly be one of the best carbines in the game right now. It very well could be the best carbine in the game. It is very strong. So, highly recommended. Obviously, mandatory Araxium. Like it's that good. You should be using it. Unless you're working on another carbine, it is seriously that good. It takes some time getting used to, and personally, I'm not the biggest fan of it because I like versatility in my carbines, and I think the GD7F is just a little too unpredictable at range, but it is a really good carbine. Horizon. Horizon's probably a B tier. It has the weird pellet mechanic, so it fires multiple shots at once. 3 default, and then you can drop it down to 2 if you take capsule and ammo, or you can run unstable. It's largely a hip-fire carbine. Most of the time, if you use a Horizon, you'll be using it in the air. I don't really like it. It's not really my thing, but it is still a solid option. At the very minimum, it's C tier. I'm going to keep it in B. Jaguar is... Oh... I'm going to put Jaguar in A tier. I don't think it's quite S tier. It is a good carbine. It's a very good carbine because it has no recoil bias, which means you just pull down and it shoots. It's just a good carbine. It's a very unassuming carbine, and it belongs in A. It can't go any lower than A, but I don't think you could push it up to S either. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I don't think it's an S tier carbine. Kindred is... I think Kindred's going to go in A as well. As long as you play around the spool mechanic, which is as long as you burst fire, which is what you should be doing anyway, it's a very strong carbine. The only reason I don't put it in S tier is because I just don't feel like it. I don't know. I don't think it's an S tier carbine. I can't really rationally explain why. I just don't think it deserves to be in the same slot as these other 3 carbines. It's a very good carbine, but I wouldn't say it's in the same range as these top 3. Lynx, this one's gonna hurt. I'm gonna put it in C tier, which is a shame because I really like the Lynx. It's 909 at 125. It's really fast firing. It's really fun to use, in my opinion. But 125 damage models are just not great. If you can quad ping with this thing, it's really good. But if you can quad ping with the Lynx, you can probably quad ping with the Jaguar or the Kindred and have a better carbine overall. So as much as I like the Lynx, I don't think it can sit any higher than B, and I'm going to have to keep it in C just because I think there are just better options. It's a shame. I really like the Lynx, but I can't put it any higher. Mercenary is an A tier carbine. It's 600, 167, super easy to control recoil. It's a free starter carbine. It's a great carbine. It's super reliable. It's really good to learn on as a new player, and it'll treat you well as a skilled player. I think it's a great option. It's worse than the Fortuna, obviously, because the Fortuna is just a better version of the Mercenary, but it's still A tier. It's that good. Newton. Newton is weird. I want to put Newton in C tier, but I know people will probably skin me if I don't put it in B or A. I'll put it in B for the sake of compromise. So Newton's gimmick is that you can't aim down sights with it, but it has very good hip-fire accuracy. It's not perfect, but it's very good. You can scope in, quote-unquote, which basically is just a slight zoom. I think a lot of people think the Newton's good because it was broken for a very long time because it had unstable ammo built in without the headshot penalty for a while. However, it's been nerfed now, and now it's basically just a regular carbine. The only reason I have it in B tier is because it enables hipfire light assault gameplay. Like, if you're jump jetting around, it's kind of interesting. Other than that, it lacks damage, and it's really uncomfortable to use, in my opinion, so I would put it in C, but I'll put it in B. Pulse RC is an S tier carbine. 167 model, duh. Insanely good recoil control, very good at range, very reliable, triple tap potential because it's 167. It's a really good carbine. I think it's A tier at the absolute minimum. I'm going to sling it into S because I think it's that good. It is just a really good carbine. Razor, I don't like the Razor. I've never been able to make it work, but I know it is logically a good carbine, so I'm going to put it in B. I don't have a lot to say on it. It's basically a mercenary that's more adapted for range, so you lose a bit of damage but gain a different recoil pattern, some other neat little traits. It's not something I've ever been able to make work, but it is a good carbine. Rogue is the burst fire version of the mercenary, and it's D tier. These two NC carbines are weird because all the other NC carbines are really good, and these are not necessarily bad guns. They're just bad because of what they are, if that makes any sense. The S-Series Mercenary is only bad. Like, the Ghost Compact is only bad because it's an S-Series weapon. All the S-Series weapons are going to be in D tier as a heads up. Like, they're all not good. They're all fine guns, but they're all just objectively worse than everything else. And the same is true for the Rogue. Burst fire carbines are kind of a lull because, yeah, while they have some better benefits compared to just manually bursting any other carbine, you can just manually burst any other carbine. Like, you don't really gain anything, and I would say the Rogue is actually the worst of the burst fire carbines because the Mercenary already 3 taps. Having a 2-tap burst, or having a 2-shot burst carbine is just not worth it. It isn't terrible. Obviously, it's a very usable carbine, but there's really just no reason to use it. Oh, Serpent. Serpent is really annoying to rank because I absolutely despise the thing. I think it's a D tier carbine, but I know it's reasonably good, so I'm going to put it in B. It's really high damage output. It's basically a shotgun in close range. It's not as good as the GD7. It shares the same damage model as the GD7, but the recoil and reload are significantly worse. So, it's a close range powerhouse, and outside of that, I would never use it. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I would put it in D tier. Prominence. Prominence is going to be D tier. It's the S-Series Solstice, and as we'll get to the Solstice in a bit, the Solstice is already not a great carbine, and this thing is a Solstice that loses damage output to gain a couple of attachments. And the Solstice already has decent enough recoil. It has weird quirks in its recoil, but still. It's just not good. There's no real reason to use it. Solstice Burst is the same story. Making the Solstice, which is already not a range carbine, into a burst carbine just doesn't do anything. It's just not good. It's the same problem. It's not that burst weapons are inherently bad, it's just that the Solstice is not a range carbine, so the Solstice Burst isn't a good candidate. Burst carbines are traditionally good for range, and when you take a carbine that's already not designed for range, it doesn't make it any good if you make it burst. Solstice is C tier. It has low damage output. It's easy to control, and it has, it's reasonably reliable. It's decent. It's an okay carbine. It's not good, but it's okay. It really needs more damage output to be any better, but it's okay. AMC, as you may have seen in my video, I absolutely despise the AMC. I fucking hate the AMC. I cannot use it. I don't like it at all. I think it's junk. That said, it's B tier. Yeah, it's B tier. It is statistically a very strong carbine, especially at range, because it never falls lower than 125 damage, which means it's 4 tap at all ranges. It also is very easy to control recoil. It has good attachments. I can't use it. Like, I don't like it. I hate the MC. I can't make it work, but it is objectively a good carbine. and unfortunately I have to put it above the 11C because it is largely an upgrade to the 11C. I don't like it, but it's B tier, okay? Track 5 Burst, yeah, it's going to stay D tier with the other burst variants. Same problem. Track 5 is not a ranged carbine. Making a burst doesn't solve this problem. It just makes it a little weird. I would say it's the best of the burst carbines, but it's still not good. Track 5 is... I'm comfortable putting it in B tier. It's a fine starter carbine. The biggest problem with it is the recoil. Other than that, it's largely fine, and if you throw a grip on it, it's fine. It's a tolerable starter carbine. It's not amazing. It's not as good as a mercenary, but it's a solid starter. Track 5S. I'm going to be controversial and put this thing in C tier. I think it's the best of the S-Series carbines, mostly because it doesn't lose nearly as much damage output compared to the others, and it's not as objectively bad as the Prominence or the Gauss Compact. The reason the Track 5S gets a bit of leniency compared to the others is because it's still 698 at 143, which is a tolerable damage model, and the recoil control, in my opinion, is very handy. It makes the Track 5 a little bit more versatile in exchange for slightly less damage output, so in my opinion, it can stay in C. I'm being a little picky with this one because I actually like the Track 5S. Most people would probably just slam it in a D tier. I think it's a C tier. We're going to save the Tanto for last. Track Shot. Track Shot's probably an A tier carbine, but probably the worst of the A tier carbines. It's either like top of B, bottom of A. It's a better Track 5 that has access to all the other shiny or Axiom carbine junk. Other than that, it's fine. It's just a Track 5 that has access to the extra gimmicks that the other directive carbines do. I think it's worth getting. It's not as good as Fortuna, and it's not, like, amazing, but it's worth getting, in my opinion. The VX6 TAC 7 is, in my opinion, an A-tier carbine. 800, 143, so it has good damage output, and it has, notably compared to the Serpent, you basically trade a bit of damage output for significantly better recoil and reload. In my opinion, it's a good gun. I like the VX6 TAC 7. It was very pleasant to Axiom. I don't have a lot to say on it. I think it's just a good, well-rounded weapon. Zenith is weird. Mostly because I did all of Zenith pre-Arsenal, and then they basically changed entirely of how Zenith works post-Arsenal, so I'm going to put it in C tier. For reference, Zenith's old gimmick was that you could take either the advanced forward grip or the advanced laser sight, so basically you could force choose it into a roll. Nowadays, they just made it kind of an all-rounder carbine. It's basically a slight upgrade on the Solstice for all intents and purposes. I think it has some unique ammo option. I think it might have unstable or something, I don't remember. It's a very forgettable carbine. It's a carbine that you can Axiom for the directive, but otherwise, you can skip it. It's not bad. It's not like the D-tier carbines, but it's fine. Tanto is... Tanto is hard to rank. I think the Tanto is dog shit. Numerically, it is a dog shit gun. Compared to all other carbines, it's dog shit. It has the worst carbine damage output in the game. It has a fairly bad recoil pattern. It has shitty bloom. But it does have perfect hipfire accuracy on the first shot, and perfect aim accuracy on the first shot, but that's not as notable. So in theory, the Tanto is good, because in theory, it's really easy to quad ping with. In reality, I'm still putting it in F tier. Having the ability to quad ping on the first in hipfire is not as strong as people make it out to be. It's not even a gun that I can recommend for skilled players, because here's the thing, okay? Here's what really tanks Tanto into F tier for me. If you can quad ping with a Tanto and make its gimmick work, you can do that with literally every other carbine on this list, and if you have the capability to quad ping consistently with guns, all of these are good guns. Like, just because a gun is theoretically cracked if you can quad ping, doesn't make it good. Like, literally every single gun on this list, for better or for worse, is a good gun if you have the skill to make them work. However, some of these are just better than others generally, and that's why Tanto has to go into F tier. If you can't quad ping, Tanto is dog shit terrible. It is easily the worst carbine on this list if you can't quad ping heads, and if you can quad ping heads, just use literally any other gun. Like, there's a friend of mine who's a very big Tanto fan. I can't even tell if it's ironic or not. He's that scary. But the Tanto just does not offer anything that other carbines don't. If you can aim well, you can do it better on any other carbine, and if you can't aim well, the Tanto has the worst damage output in the class, and it's just not a good option. Also, it sounds like shit, and in my opinion, the gun model is ugly. Yes, that is a valid reason to put it in F tier. Jokes aside, it's just not a good carbine. It is objectively the worst carbine in the game. And people who go on the comments be like, oh, but Lexi, you can quad ping the Tanto. Like I just said, you can do that with literally every other firearm on this list in this entire game, and it will make any gun look good if you're good enough to use them. For all intents and purposes, the Tanto is the worst carbine in the game. If I'm going to be a little bit more picky here, the best carbine in the game is probably the Bandit or the GD7. I could really give it to either of these. The best directive carbine is the Fortuna. If you're a new player and looking for carbine options, I would highly recommend the Mercenary, which is your starter on NC, the Pulse RC, which is 650 certs on VS, and the Jaguar, which is 650 certs on TR. If you're playing NSO, you're basically only using the X75 unless you're going for Newton, in which case you're basically forced to use the other ones. That's the TLDR. People are probably going to complain, but it's a tier list. That's kind of the whole point. The person who requested this video on Reddit, you know who you are, so you're welcome. And yeah, I will stop yapping now.